Have you ever regarded rest as a four-letter word? You know, the kind of thing that we all know about what we think it means, but really don't regularly enter into rest, or most of us look down upon it. Hi, I'm Dr. Jeffrey Rutstein, and welcome to the Wired for Wellbeing podcast, where each week we explore how understanding your life through the lens of the nervous system can help you transform the way you live, love, and relate. And each week I am joined by my good friend and producer, Steve Lessard. Steve, how are you?
Hey, Jeffrey, I'm doing great today. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Nice. So what are we talking about today?
Well, you know, rest is a big thing in life, and it's getting more attention in the literature these days. For many, many decades, we've given a lot of attention to sleep, but nowhere near the same understanding towards rest. And I think that a lot of times people I'll have people say to me, I rest. I go home and after a long day, I lay on the sofa, put on Netflix, I read my phone, maybe I listen to a book. And so that's some people's concept of rest. And it's not a bad one, but it's not rest.
So what's your definition of rest?
So my definition of rest, and what I think the literature is beginning to point to, is periods of time when we're really able to deeply relax. This doesn't mean just sleeping. It can be sleeping, but a lot of rest can happen with just taking a few moments to do nothing. Most of what we think is rest is actually low-grade distraction. Well, I'll distract myself right now by watching Netflix. I'll distract myself by catching up on news or social media or a recipe, or I'll read about my favorite hobby. And again, these are all fine things to do. There's nothing wrong with them at all, but they do not perform the physiological necessary function of rest. Now, I guess it would be good here to explore a little bit about why is rest important, right? A lot of us would say, hey, I think I've made it through a lot of my life without resting other than when I sleep at night. I'm fine. And in truth, that can be true for people. They can not rest and be okay. But if you're interested in kind of optimally functioning, meaning that you're supporting your well-being, your health, and your energy, and you're diminishing the chances of you feeling overwhelmed, unnecessarily stressed, unnecessarily stuck in anger or shame or fear, then rest begins to play a very, very important function. Rest is the moments when we can just touch into a moment of non-doing, right? I mean, that's in essence what rest is. It's not doing something physically, and it's not doing something mentally. Some people will feel, well, as long as I'm not raking leaves or pushing the lawnmower, I can rest. And well, that's true that you might enjoy some physical non-doing, not resting, but we could be amazingly mentally busy. And I think that this is also because for so many trauma survivors, being active and doing has felt safer. And I think it's also a message of our culture that being busy, being productive, somehow connotes a higher worth on the individual. I'm really busy. I have a lot to do versus I have nothing to do, right? So there's something that culture supports in us being busy, that we can feel better about ourselves for being busy, that from our trauma, from our family dynamics, maybe we felt a little safer or a little bit more valued or respected if we were busy. And that there's some nobility in being busy. But that also indicates that there's a lack of nobility if you're not busy, if you're resting. And so I'd love for us to see if we can turn that upside down.
Yeah, it's such an interesting experience, and there are people in my life and people I've met who just can't seem to slow down, right? They can't have unstructured time because of what it says about them or what they think it says about them. That like for some people it actually seems like like it's death. Like they'd rather die, might be an exaggeration, but like slowing down or stopping isn't an option. And what's the nervous system doing to that person, or where's that coming from when they're holding that belief?
So that's a great question. I think that it's it's twofold. Partly it's habit. So partly we get used to being busy and we don't feel quite well when we're not busy. Again, it's a habit that was established initially out of safety, but it also forms a function. Is that if I'm busy, if I'm continually engaging in work, so I have to focus my mind on reading or writing or typing or meeting with people or doing something else, I'm busy, I'm engaged, and I don't have much time for my mind to wander as much. And so my busyness can act as a protection against emotional or mental pain.
Like if I keep going, I don't have to pay attention to the voice inside my head bringing up something that's difficult or painful.
Right, because I don't have time right now. I'm sorry, I don't have time to deal with this because I have this deadline. I have to meet this person. I have to complete this project. And so our busyness becomes the reason why we can't do any self care. I don't have time to meditate. I don't have time to go to the gym. I don't have time to do some rest and relaxation. I'm way too busy. Who can do that? But everybody makes time to eat, and almost everybody makes time to sleep and take care of needs of the bathroom. So it's not really true that we don't have time for it. It's the story we tell. Just like you said before, people can't. I don't believe people can't. I believe everyone can slow down, but what gets in the way is people get afraid. They feel unsafe and they get afraid, and then they kind of scurry back to being busy.
So I want to jump back into this rest definition because what I'm hearing you share is don't do anything. And I also want to tease apart this like low grade entertainment idea that you brought in of like, we could scroll on our phone or like, isn't that restful? Like, how do I determine between like, is this actually rest or is this me continuing to distract myself?
Well, because you're still engaging in something in your mind, right? So, like I can play solitaire as the best of any. That's one of my favorite games on my phone. But it's not rest, and it's a distraction. It lets me think about something that's interesting to me and not related to any emotional valence or charge. I can just play this game like I've played it thousands of times. But it's not the same as rest. And most of us, truthfully, have not been taught like how to rest. We've only been taught by society, our parents and culture, how to do, how to make things, how to think of things, how to create things, how to feel bad about not making things or being behind schedule and making things. But this is like our whole focus. I have to make something of me. I have to make something of my life. I have to make my children into something. I have to make my dog a good citizen. We have to do all these things that we're always assuming, right? As if life is one long, unceasing opportunity to do. And that is what is going to give us satisfaction, peace, connection, love, ease. The truth is, doing won't necessarily bring us towards any of those. And if all that I know how to do, Steve, is work, 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 be busy, be busy, be busy, worry, 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 then even when I don't have work in front of me, that's what I'm going to keep doing. Work, work, work. I'll be thinking about my next thing I have to do or wondering when it's happening or start creating ideas about what I should work on next. But so I may not have a project in front of me, but I'm already thinking in terms of how do I keep that going? What do I do? So many of us do this. Yeah, I was sharing with you a little bit earlier today, so today On Monday morning, I have time to do some things in the morning. And so I gave myself some self care time this morning to have a morning, to have a walk, to have my coffee without needing to do anything. And it was a moment of really choosing some self care. And I'm getting pretty good at this. But I found that today, and I think it's because I was already a little bit dysregulated before I started on my walk. And what I was dysregulated from was I've had some work that I have been a little stuck on completing. And because of that, I'm not able to finish it right now. I know I will within a few days. But today, because I had that hanging over me and I had made this desired commitment to take care of myself, I followed through on the behavior, going for my walk, enjoying my coffee. But what I found was even while I was doing that, my mind was still continually in the background leaning towards, oh, you really got to get that done. You've been avoiding it. Like, this is during my self-care time. I'm going to work later on. I could run into that stuff then. But my nervous system was interfering with my attempts to allow myself to rest and eventually get to the work by diminishing my rest. So I wasn't doing physically and I wasn't working on the project mentally, but I was lambasting myself and scolding myself for not getting it done and thinking about um, what else needs to be done for it and why I've been avoiding it. But there was a negative tinge. So I not only didn't work on the paper, but I ended up feeling bad both about my self care time and also bad about me as a person. Now, that's my nervous system. That's not really the truth about who I am. But this is how we get caught. And so years ago, what would have happened is I would have stopped whatever I was doing and just jumped into then working on the paper. I would have taken the path of least resistance, which is just get and do it already. Now, sometimes that's helpful to do. That's wise. That can be a good decision. But a lot of times it's because we also don't feel any entitlement to rest, to having that time for us. So that's another thing, right? Like, we know we should sleep, but rest is something different, right? And it's not so much about, yes, part of what you said is the doing nothing, right? But it's really about what happens is we lean more into being. And that is a quality of experience that most people don't get to touch into on a regular basis. We're far too busy mentally with managing our work and our relationships and the to-do list of the day and managing people in our lives or the family or traffic, right? We're we're always doing and engaged, and we overlook this really essential but necessary quality of being alive, this quality of being. Now, in our mind, when we're working always through our mind, we are always going to be running against a clock and trying to solve problems. That's always how it'll be. If I shift so that I'm more regulated and I'm able to access a quality of being, then what happens is what arises is a quality of ease without me creating it, a quality of care without me creating it. It's just what's there when I am able to get quiet and land there. And also this feeling of enjoyment or nourishment from being quiet. It doesn't feel like I'm being restrained or held still. It actually feels like I'm able to drop into and touch a quality of stillness that's already and always inherent inside of me, but I'm way too busy to notice. And when I can occasionally take that time to actually locate that stillness in me, that breathes a new breath. It allows my nervous system to both take a breath, but actually start to recharge in a different way and in a much more efficient way than if I just lay down on the sofa and skim Netflix.
Your story of your walk put an image in my head where you were mentally going through all of the things that you should be doing, right? And the image that came to my head is like a leaky faucet, like a leaky energy faucet. So this thing you were doing, going on your walk, enjoying your coffee to try to recharge you, just like you just shared, that what resting brings to us, the energy mentally was that leaky faucet. And then, compounded by the when we just push ourselves, we just push, 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 we never get that energy back. And I've had an interesting journey with this recently that I was reading an article and it talked about the benefit of white space. I was like, oh, what the heck's white space? Right. And it's rest is what the end result was. But it took this article calling it white space for me to be like, I'll try that. The word rest was something I've even had this conversation with you. Like napping is really difficult for me. So I think for a long time I confused napping with resting. And maybe that's an outcome when your body's tired. You might might fall asleep, sure. But I'm like, Jeffrey, I can't nap. Like it takes me so long to fall asleep. So why even bother just lying down for 20 minutes, 15 minutes? I'm not going to sleep. It's a waste of time. It was this word white space that I've started to schedule in white space moments in my day, particularly on days I need a lot of creative energy to recharge. So I just want to play with this idea of like finding ways to trick ourselves to rest, maybe, as well as this like leaky faucet, leaky energy, and pushing ourselves to collapse
Yes.
without this.
So, when I started and I said, I asked people if they considered rest a 4-letter word, because some people do. Some people feel that that's not a good quality for them. I want to be productive, constructive, well thought of, busy, in control. Um, I don't want to be resting. I don't even know what that means, but it feels like it's not good. Right. So we don't even have a conceptualization or an idea of what rest is, especially because all that most of us have is the conceptualization of doing. That the only way that you'll know me as a person is by what I do in the world, what I do in life. Instead of, you'll get to know what I do in life, but that doesn't mean you get to know me. Right. On the other hand, you can experience the quality of my being. If I can experience the quality of your being, then we get to relate at this deeper, much more authentic, much more real level without all this energy about having to pose and present a better self. I'd rather present to you my flawless self where I went for a walk, drank my coffee, and didn't think for 1 second about my workload, right? Because I don't want to admit that to myself or to you. So even the idea of beginning to admit the difficulty with rest ourselves gives us an idea of where we stand with it. And the other thing is that some people say, yeah, I work until I rest. I rest at night. And what they're saying is they work until they drop. They work until they can't type another character on the screen. They can't read another sentence. They can't figure out one more thing to do. They can't fold one more piece of laundry. They can't do something else for work. That's not rest. That's when our body just runs out of fuel and collapses. Now, we can collapse from exhaustion, but we can also collapse from when we get pushed to that low energy defensive state of shutdown and collapse. We feel like withdrawing, going back to sleep, being inactive. And that's also going to get us to want to be on the couch, to want to be inactive, to be internal.
So give our listeners a few cues that maybe they're in that collapse state, because like most of this is so subconscious and unconscious. And what I want to do is offer people a few of those moments to say, I'm feeling that. And Jeffrey mentioned that. I wonder if I'm in a collapse state or an exhaustion state.
So, yeah. So first of all, in the program, we have 4 guiding questions. And the first 2 questions, and this is the healing trauma program that we teach. The first question is, what state am I in now? And the second question is, and what do I need right now to move a bit more towards ventral, towards regulation? So the first question is a great one for us to ask ourselves. What state am I in right now? You can put a hand on your heart or your chest, take a moment to check in, and just notice the overall quality or state of the body. Are you pretty relaxed? Are you kind of numb and empty and tired and sluggish? Are you kind of tense and contracted and either irritable and fast moving inside, or anxious, worried, looping, feeling like things are moving too slow and we need to get up and go? It gives you a sense of where you are. And again, anytime that we're noticed that we're not in regulation, which will be frequently, it doesn't mean that something's wrong, but we can offer ourselves some assistance. Wherever I notice I am, I can do a little bit of a practice to try to move one or two toes into regulation. Because if I have a little bit of me in regulation, I open up much more deep amount of resources that I can use to deal with what's going on. So just by turning our awareness towards our state is the first step to notice and name the state. And then the second thing is to do some practice that helps you come back towards regulation a little bit. So you might find that you're just cruising along in fight or flight. You're getting work done. But when you check into your body, you notice you have a little headache, back is kind of tight. Maybe your bladder is telling you it needs some attention. We just sort of stop listening to these quieter body signals when we want to push through a state and keep working. But pushing through a state and keep working will gather a cost. It doesn't kill us, but if you keep doing it a lot, it'll make you more exhausted. It'll make you a bit more depressed. It'll make you have more bodily pain. So there's something wise about checking in and seeing what you need. It's a way of remaining in touch with our nervous system while we're doing something, instead of kind of like saying, shut up, we're sitting down and writing this paper, and I don't want to hear a peep from you until we're done, which is, I think, how most of us get through our day. We don't want any noise from the peanut gallery while we're trying to make our way through the day. So I think that's why a lot of people work, work, work until they collapse. It's just part of that safety trip. And when they collapse, they can't do anything else but that at that point in time. Sometimes when we choose to rest, it's a choice. It's not like I have to rest at that moment. But sometimes I'll go, if I rest now, I'll have much more energy to deal with this in a half hour. If I do a little meditative practice right now and drop back in, I'll be much more clear, much less unburdened to handle this attention demanding thing that's coming up.
It occurs to me how um, culturally individuals maybe without a meditation practice or experiences with guided meditations, we don't have any really clear, I don't know, training, guidelines, experience with just sitting with our breath or our thoughts. I mean, I'm realizing there's maybe a larger problem here of, well, what do I do when I
Yes.
rest?
Yes. Yes. I mean, so let's talk about that for a few minutes, right? Resting is more about letting go in the moment of planning, letting go in the moment of efforting to make something get done, to solve something, to move forward on something in this moment, letting the drive or compulsion to keep moving, allow that to be released for a moment, not forever, for a moment. To turn your attention away from all the busyness in the mind, which it's going to be doing, or the judgment about you for not being busy enough, or the judgment about someone else for not being busy enough, or whatever those themes are going on. Just gently turn your awareness towards the body and towards immediate this moment sensation, the way that your body meets the surface on which you're sitting right now. And just notice what happens as you begin to turn your attention from thoughts to moving up close to sensation. Notice that a couple things happen. The body begins to relax a little. There's a little less clenching in the belly. and we feel a little less squished, a little less constricted, a little less narrowed. Just, just by making a conscious effort to open our awareness to being, to the quality of what is available in life when we're not actively doing. And here's the thing, we can eventually learn how to cultivate a connection with our being so that it comes with us when we're working, when we're relating, when we're eating. In other words, that this deeper ability doesn't have to be so separate from our life, but can become mixed and infused with it in some ways to allow us to have moments of not always having to be in such elevated flights of or states of fight or flight or shutdown.
So what are we talking about? Are we talking like 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 30 minutes? Am I lying down? Am I sitting? You mentioned going for a walk. That seems like my brain would be doing a whole heck of a lot on a walk.
So when I walk, I do a little bit of a combination of a kind of mindful walking, feeling my body, my feet making contact with the ground, uh, the way that weight is transferred between my legs and back, the sunlight on my face, the air on my face. And then I'll notice sometimes, of course, like my mind will start to drift towards things, problems, issues. That's totally natural. That's what it's going to do. But when I catch that, I don't start jumping on those thoughts and thinking them. Okay, let's roll up our sleeves and tackle this one. I'm going for a walk and I'll get back to those when I'm at the house. And I then come back to my breathing, my steps falling on the ground, what mm, the scenery is as it changes as I move through the street, as I move through space. So, in anything, there's a little bit of attentional discipline that we can begin to use that helps direct our soothing, our regulation, and our rest. Part of rest is developing the capacity not to stay so absorbed or hijacked by your thoughts, by your mood, by your worries. It's their nature to keep doing that. So even when we're laying down, like I can make up a story, Steve, and say you lay down for your nap, but your mind is still working. And maybe it's still working on projects or what you think you got to get done. So you're not doing in your body, but you're also not finding a way to drop into full rest because there's a level of doing that's still being engaged in. And I imagine is still being believed as safe, right? Like I've always felt, as much as I've hated shame, I kind of always knew that when I felt shame, it was still safer. It sucked, but it was safer, right? So I think that for those people who are afraid sometimes of napping, it's because of judgment or shame or difficulty turning their mind out. And so anyone would benefit from learning how to relax the body, right? And that's one way that we can transfer the large doing of thinking and creating things to a very more subtle doing by directing our awareness into body parts and inviting them to relax, to release their holding or gripping, to become heavy or loose or warm. These ways of helping guide someone to encourage this quality of deeper and deeper settling also begins to give us a taste of what rest is, because these are all stages of very relaxed awareness before sleep. We're not asleep, we're not dreaming yet, but most of us are not quite familiar with those lower levels of arousal that are above sleep, but deeply resting, right? It's a little bit like in that pre sleep period or when you're waking up in the morning post sleep. As we transition through those states, we have kind of a relaxed sense about us. Our thinking is softer, reality feels a little softer, um, and there's more of a fluidity between our body, thinking, feeling, and the environment. It's an easier, not as a harsh time for the nervous system. And it's not like we need to get in those states during the day, but if we can give ourselves moments, and getting back to what you were saying, a minute or two, a few times during the day would be wonderful. Doesn't have to be 20 minutes or 40 minutes at once. It can certainly be if people want to continue to develop this capacity at a deeper way. But to start, 1 or 2 minutes a couple of times a day is great. And just, I mean, people could try doing some progressive relaxation. There's stuff on YouTube, you could look that up. There's also other types of mind body processes that help relax, soothe, and quiet the body. And these give people a taste of resting. Also, yoga nidra is a deep, deep, powerful NSDR, it's called non sleep deep rest. Really helps people learn how to lower their arousal, lower their activation in their body, but still remain present. It's a very deep and healing kind of rest. So, any of those would be great for people to explore to see how learning this quality or capacity of rest can support their well being, support their improved being able to function when they want to, and also being able to support a deeper relaxation when they're not working. Because so many of us kind of stay working even when we're not, right? It's a headset, right? How does that land for you, Steve?
My brain's going to kind of a funny place here. And what I'm thinking of is like, okay, I or our listeners decide like, okay, we're gonna try this rest thing. I trust Jeffrey. I like his podcast. I like his programs. I trust I'm going to try this rest thing. A little skeptical, but I'm going to try it. And I set, 20 or 30 minutes and I lie down and I focus on my body sensations and any number of thousands of thoughts come in and out of my head, but I'm still feeling my body. And at the end of it, maybe my timer goes off or my, meditation app rings and I get up and I'm like, well, okay, but did it work? My brain went to like, well, what's the proof that it's that I might look at that like, yeah, that was helpful or that was useful? Because I'm intuiting myself, maybe needing to trick myself to have a reason to come back to it instead of just letting my brain say, man, you just wasted your time.
Right.
Nothing happened there.
So I think this also speaks to something else that's folded in that, which is that your nervous system is probably also looking for proof. Why should I do this? How would I know it's working? Which is interesting. It's a thought, right? It's coming from a thinking mind, so it makes perfect sense. But what we're going to be looking at is, does it change your experience?
Can you explain that more? Give me more.
Sure. So I can be busy thinking and doing stuff and realize I've spent hours during the day doing that, right? And I'm a bit distant from my body. I'm a bit distant from really connecting with people around me. I'm more internal. So then I go for rest. And I usually rest for about 20 or 30 minutes. Sometimes I put on a guided meditation. Often I just do it in silence. And I just relax my body and mind as much as I'm able to in that moment. And it becomes easier the less you strive for getting to a certain level of relaxation. If you hold in your head, I got to get to a number 10, nothing else will do, you're going to have trouble relaxing. You're setting preconditions on it. So there'll be some days I can relax very, very, very deeply, and other days I can't relax quite as deeply. That's okay. But what I'll notice anytime is that I always feel better. It doesn't mean that the rest of my day doesn't have burden in it. It just means that I had a moment to come back to me and to be a little less driven by my thoughts and the machine of my mind, which is very efficient. It does what it does well, right? But that's not who I am. That's not the only aspect I want to live in my life, right? There's a whole aspect of life to be lived with a heart, with a gut, with a body that can interact with other bodies in friendship or in love or in collaboration. So it's finding a way to come back to ourselves, to reconnect with the good and the gold, the stuff that's already good in us, and the stuff that's really gold. And the stuff that's gold and good in us is our feelings, our quality of being, our sensitivity, this the stuff that makes us us, but in a deeply human way. And that gets smushed the more any human is in fight or flight or in shutdown and collapse. We become kind of like caricatures of our entire self, and some of us live there. And so, one of the ways of beginning to slide out of that is to incorporate periods of rest, to begin to give yourself a direct experience of what it's like to not be on autopilot all the time, to not be one endless doing and thinking machine, but to give yourself 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes here and there is enough to begin to change how you experience yourself.
The idea that's been coming back to me throughout this episode is really the power of this self-compassionate act, right? This act of self-care. And what I'm intuiting is people are going to have a hard time potentially giving themselves permission or like feeling like they're worthy of
Yes,
that level of self-care. And I kind of want to go there next because I think that's an obstacle, I think, for a lot of people.
absolutely. I think shame is a huge obstacle, and I think anybody who has felt that it's safer to not take care of their needs, but to make sure you're doing everything to keep other people happy, satisfied, and not angry. It's a way of extending uh, some of the trauma lessons we may have learned, right? That our safety is dependent on our being there for other people and not being there for us. So a lot of folks, when they first try this, are going to feel confused, wondering if they're doing it right. Their shame and judgment is going to pop up a few seconds after they stop. Well, did you do that right? I don't think you did that right. And did it do anything? I don't think it did anything. I think you wasted time. So now you still didn't get your work done and you wasted even more time. That may very well be what happens. It doesn't mean that that voice is telling you the truth. Shame doesn't need to tell you the truth. It just needs to tell you something to get you to stop in your tracks and to shut down. So it's going to try to get you to stop resting. Shame will only support doing. It doesn't support you in regulation. It supports you in closing down and in working harder or running away or dissolving into yourself. It never does anything that helps you feel calmer, more grounded, more centered, more whole. Shame's only purpose is to stop you dead in your tracks. So everybody who tries this is going to find some little bit of shame popping up, and maybe a little bit more than just a little bit. That's to be expected. And that's where you still don't give up. All right, I knew, or I was told this is going to be like this. And so I'm going to practice. I may feel a little better. Then there's probably going to be a voice in me that's going to say, you wasted your time. You didn't do anything. Don't do this again. And I don't have to fight that. I can just let that go. And then tomorrow I can still make time to do the practice. Realizing that maybe for a few weeks, I'm going to have this constant voice afterwards just saying, well, that was a waste. But remember, that's just your nervous system trying to get you to go back to your old ways. Be more on autopilot. Don't be checking into your state. You don't need to rest. You'll be safest and most loved if you work yourself to death and work all the time, then try to take care of you.
So we've been covering the things that we tell ourselves for all of the reasons we tell ourselves things. But I imagine there's people out there who are like, but if I did that, my parent or my loved one or my friend would say, well, why are you doing that? And that then creates potentially its own shame spiral. So I want you to help us with a like phrase or reframing of that people might be able to share with those around them who, with this idea, are triggered by their own shame and nervous system of like, oh, we don't do that. Why do you do that? Um, how do we help them navigate that really complex situation that's just going to compound their
Right.
shame?
So you have to decide on the safety of the people you would tell, right? So if I grew up in a family where no one valued rest, no one valued self-care, it was frowned upon or looked as selfish, I probably wouldn't be telling them I'm doing this because they would give me flack for it. They would shame me or judge me for it, and that's not what I want. But I might say, I'm going to be studying something from 10 to 10:30 every Tuesday or every day of the week. Please don't interrupt me while I'm doing that. They don't have to know. Or you could say you're meditating or you're doing something else. For people that feel safe, that won't judge you, I would try telling them truth. I'm exploring rest. I'm exploring trying to let my body see and knows what it means for it to have rest. But don't go sharing this with people who have no interest in understanding rest, have no interest in you resting, and will not want to be interested in your rest, but will want to discourage you from it. Those would be the people to avoid sharing this with because they're just going to do that. They're going to discourage you. So part of this is also having the bravery to say, my parents, my spouse, someone else may not understand this, but I still need to do this for me. It's the willingness to put self-care as an important aspect of our life, not just as an afterthought, right? And I don't mean being selfish, but self-care means balancing our desire to truly be there for others with hopefully a growing ability to understand what it's like to be there for us. They go hand in hand, right? So rest is a way of taking care of us. Collapse is what we do just to pick ourselves back up off the floor and continue doing what we're doing. It's not a moment of refueling, of nourishment, of truly touching into something valuable for us. We just collapse and go unconscious in a way. And again, that's helpful, but not restorative, not replenishing.
Well, Jeffrey, thank you for unpacking this rest revolution that I hope our listeners and viewers
Good.
explore and take advantage of and support themselves with. This was our question today. This is something that was up for us, and we covered this topic, but we also take questions from our audience. So I'm wondering if you can do two things. If you can share how people can send questions to us, and then let us know a little bit of what else that you've got going on.
Okay, that's great. So if you would like to send a question, please feel free to call 1-866 357 5156. If for any reason you can't reach that telephone number, if you're calling from outside the country, feel free to send an email either with a voice memo or audio file attached, or you can just type out your question and send that question to hello@drjeffreyrutstein.com. And if you would like a slightly deeper exploration of the concepts that we move into during our time here, feel free to go to my website. I have a free gift for you there. And it's a 20-minute video that goes through the states and the particular exercises and practices you can engage in them. And to get that gift, you just go to drjeffreyrutstein.com/links, and you'll see a link on that page for free gift. Steve, as always, thank you for being my friend and fellow explorer on these journeys.
I really enjoyed unpacking this concept today. I think it's one that I know I struggle with, and so many people struggle with, just understanding correctly and giving ourselves permission to do something that is deeply, deeply important for ourselves. So thank you for walking us through that, Jeffrey, and I'll see you next week.
Sounds good. Remember, friends, that this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for physical or mental health care. If you are struggling and suffering, please reach out to a qualified healthcare professional. Thank you all for being with us today. Until next time, bye for now.